Okay, in the next few days, your job, get the notes down and the problems, and that's a 5 out of 5 for that day, okay? Because these can get pretty aggravating until you really know what you're doing. We have to take these expressions, and there's two parts. This is your first part, and then I'll show you what you're doing here. We have x to the fourth times x to the second. We have to simplify. Okay, the first thing I need to do in a problem when I start looking at these is if I have any parentheses, if I see any of them, I'm going to circle them. But I don't have any in this one, so we're good. Okay, so the only base you have to worry about is the x base. Okay, and I've circled the numbers that are actually exponents so you can see them. Okay, x to the fourth power times x to the second. I have started to circle what the powers are. So I have x, but how many x's do we have? There's 2 of them. So the first x, it is to the fourth power, but there's no parentheses in this problem, so I just write 4 down. And then, as you can see, I've underlined the entire problem. Both of these x's are above this line right here. So if both of them are above the line, that means they're being multiplied. That means I'm going to add when I get the other x. And this x here is to the second, so I'd be taking 4 plus 2. Now 4 plus 2 is 6, so we have x to the power of 6. Now for this second part here, just circle all of your factors. We just have the x to 6. Now that's a variable, and I have no idea what x is. So what I do is I just transfer x to the 6 over here and just leave it like it is. So x to 6 is the answer to that problem. Okay, my next problem, we have y to the 9th times y. So y is the only base I need to worry about. And as you can see, keep in mind, you see this line I've drawn here, okay? So the first y I have, that's to the 9th power, okay? So I'm going to write a 9 down. And then there's another y. Well, they're right across from each other. They're being multiplied, so that's going to be an adding, okay? And then go find this y right here. That's to the 1 power because it doesn't have a power. And again, there's no parentheses here, so I just write 1 down. So I'm going to be combining the y's into 1, and I just take 9 plus 1. 9 plus 1 is 10. Okay, now this is the only factor we have is the y to the 10th power. So because y is a variable, I can't really figure that out, and I'm going to keep that as y to the 10th. Okay, my next problem, y to the 3rd power times y to the 3rd power. So y, again, is the only base I have to worry about. So I have this first y, it's to the, again, I don't have any parentheses. If I have any parentheses, I'm going to actually circle the entire parentheses, but I don't really have any here. So the first y is to the 3rd, so we just write a 3rd down. You don't need to multiply anything because there's no parentheses there. Okay, and here's my next y. Well, it needs a power. It's to the 1 power, okay? If it doesn't have one, that's me putting a 1 and circling it. So I'm still multiplying, so I plus 1. And then the next y, the final y I have, is to the 3rd power. So again, I'm still multiplying, so I'm going to plus 3. So I take 3 plus 1 plus 3, and that gives me 7, okay? And then y to the 7th. Now, since y is a variable, I can't simplify y to the 7th power. I just keep it y to the 7th. So I just bring y to the 7th over here. Okay, my next problem. A to the 4th power times a to the 3rd power times a to the 10th power. So here's my first a. It is to the 4th power, so I write a 4 down. Again, there's no parentheses I need to worry about so far here. So I write a 4 down. Okay, then there's another a. Well, that's on top. Again, see this line I made? All these a's are on top of that line. There's no a's under the line. So it's all going to be adding, okay? So plus, go find the next a. That's to the 3rd. And go find the next a. There it is. That's to the 10th, okay? So again, I just take 4 plus 3 plus 10. 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 10 is 17. So a to the 17th power, I have no, again, I circle it. There's no way I can simplify a to the 17th power because it's just a variable. So all I do in this is just write a to the 17th. Okay. Those first ones are easy, pretty much a walk in the park. Okay, now in the next problems, I'm going to start seeing parentheses. If you see a parentheses, you need to circle the parentheses, and in that circle also include the power that's outside the 2. Okay, so that means any power that is in this circle has to be multiplied by 2. Okay, simple as that. So x is the only base I have to worry about. Well, it's to the 5th power, but again, it's in that parentheses that I circled. So I need to, any power I see needs to be multiplied by 2. So I need to take 5 times 2. What's 5 times 2? 5 times 2 is 10. So x is to the 10th power, and that's the only x we have there, okay? It's not like all these other ones where I had an x here, an x here, a y here, a y here, y, 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 a. See, on this one, this is the only x I have. So again, to fit, but it has a 5th power in parentheses, so we need to times it by 2. Okay, now x to the 10th, clearly there's no way I can simplify x to the 10th, so I just bring this over here. X to the 10th is the final answer. Okay, next one. Again, we have y to the 4th to the 6th. So I see a parentheses. You want to circle the parentheses along with that power outside, okay? So y is the only base, so I see this y. Now it is to the 4th power, but since that's in the parentheses, you are going to have to multiply 4 by 6. You're not going to just write 4 down or write 6 down. The 4 is multiplied by 6. So 4 multiplied by 6, 4 times 6, that's 24. Okay, and that's the only y that I see up there, so I can just stick with y to the 24th. I don't need to add or subtract because there are no more y's. That's the only one I had. Okay, now once again, y is a variable, so there's no way I can simplify y to the 24th power because I have no way of knowing what y is. So I just leave it, y to the 24th power. Okay, my next problem. This time there are 2 bases we have to worry about, a 5 and an x. Okay, and again, I have that parentheses, so circle the parentheses and also include in that circle that power of 2 that's outside of it. Okay, so let's look at our 5. Now, the 5 has no power, so that would make it to the 1 power, so I'm going to put a 1 there. But again, that's in my circle. It's in my parentheses. So that 1 needs to be multiplied by 2, 1 times 2, because that 2 belongs to everything in this circle, everything in this parentheses. So I need to take 2 times 1, okay? 2 times 1 is 2. So that 5 is to the 2 power, to the 2nd power. That's the only 5 I have, so let's move on to the x. Here's the only x I have. It has no direct power, so I put a 1. But again, that's in a parentheses. So I take 1 times 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. And that's the only x I have, so I don't need to add to that exponent. Okay, now we have 2 things here, 5 to the 2nd and x to the 2nd. Now 5 is not a variable, so I can figure out what that is. So I clone 2 5s. 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, so this changes into 25 times. And then again, you can clone 2 x's, but why? What's the point? I don't even know what number x is, so I'm going to keep that x to the 2nd, and over here I write x to the 2nd, and that's the answer, 25 times x to the 2nd. Okay, my next problem, I've got a base 7, a base x, base y. Again, we have a parentheses, so I would suggest you circle that along with the outside power. So any power that comes out of here has to be multiplied by 2. So here's 7. Here's the only 7 I have. It's to the 1 power, but it is in the circle in parentheses, so we have to take 1 times 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, then this x right here, that needs a power, so it would be to the 1 power. But again, that's in the parentheses, and that 2nd power needs to be applied to any power in here. So 1 times 2, again, is 2. Now I go to the y. That's the only x I have to worry about. Now the y. Y is to the 1 power. And that's in parentheses, so 1 times 2 is 2. Okay? Now let's circle these 3 factors one at a time. Now 7 to the second, there's no variable, so that would be 2 7s multiplied, and that gives me 49. So this changes, that's 49. Now this would be cloning 2 x's, but if I don't know what number x is, that really does me no good. So this will stay x to the second power. This y to the second stays the same, so that's y to the second power. So we have 49 times x to the second power times y to the second power. Okay, now my next one. We have a 10 times an x. So I find my parentheses, and I have one right here. Don't ever put your own parentheses. It will start off right here. So I circle that, and the outside power is a 2. Now you're like, well, what about that? Well, that's not in a parentheses, so I'm not going to circle that. Okay, the 2 bases I have to worry about is 10 and x. Now, how many big 10s are there? Just this one right here. Now, that needs a power, so it would be to the 1, but that's in that circle. So that 1 needs to be multiplied by 2. So what's 1 times 2? 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, now and that's the only 10 I have. Now let's move on to the x. How many x's are up there? There's 2 here and here, and they're both on top, so that's going to be added together. So let's look at our first x. Now it's to the 6th power, but again, that's in the parentheses that I circled, so I need to multiply that 6 by 2. What's 6 times 2? Well, it's 12, so I start with a 12, and then I go on to the other x, but that's not in the circle. Okay, I didn't circle that because it's not in a parentheses. So I take that 2, I just write that 2 that's right there down. You don't need to multiply. It's not in a parentheses. So 12 plus 2 is 14. So we have 10 to the second power times x to the 14th power. So I have these 2 factors. 10 to the second's easy to find. We just clone 2 10s and multiply. Gives you 100. So this changes into 100. And the x to the 14th, again, x is a variable, so it's pointless to clone 14 x's. It just stays x to the 14th because I don't know. So that's the answer, 100 times x to the power of 14. Okay, my next problem. 8 and m are the bases. All these other things don't really matter down here. Well, they matter. I don't want to say they don't matter. But I don't write them down right away because these are exponents. And the exponents in these problems are going to change. But I know I have a big 8, and I know I have the letter m. So let's check out, again, circle the parentheses. Okay, you want to make sure you're looking there because any power coming out of here needs to be multiplied by 2. That third power needs to be multiplied by nothing because it's not in the parentheses. Okay, so this 8 right here, it's to the 1 power, but it is in that circle, so the 1 needs to be multiplied by 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, now let's go look at our m. Okay, now there are 2 of them, and they're both multiplied. I can see the dot right there, so that means we're going to add whatever exponents come out of there. Okay, this first m, 4 times 2 is 8. Okay. But this other m is not in the circle. It's not in a parentheses, so I just write the 3 down. So 8 plus 3 is 11. So I have 8 to the second power times m to the 11th power, and those are my 2 factors I have. So 8 to the second power, that means 2 8s multiplied, and that would be 64. And then m to the 11th. And that's multiplied, simplified. Okay, now the next one can be kind of confusing. The only parentheses we have is right here, okay? So just circle that and include that 4 that's right outside, okay? And there are no parentheses here. Okay, now, again, I've circled all the exponents, so I have a 6, D, 2, and D. So I put 6 and 2, and then I only wrote the D variable once. That's all I need. Okay, when I have a variable, I might have more than one of them. Heck, I might have 5 of them, but I just write it down once. Okay, so let's look at the 6. The 6 has a 1, but is that in that circle? Is it in a circle? Is there a parenthesis surrounding it? No, it's not. So you just need to write the 1 down. You're not going to multiply the 1 by anything. Okay, it's just to the first. That's the only 6 I have. So let's move on to the 2, big 2. Here's the big 2. Now that is inside the circle, so I have to take the 1 that I put there and multiply it by 4. So 1 times 4 is 4. That's the only big 2 I have. Now let's look for the D. So here's my first D. It's to the second power, but again, I didn't circle that because it wasn't in a parentheses. So we don't need to multiply the 2 by anything. We just need to write the 2 down, and then it's times, so we'd add. And then this D is to the 5th, but that is in the circle, so I need to multiply 5 by 4. 5 times 4 is 20. So I know that 2 plus 20 would be 22. Okay? Now we got 6 to the 1st, we got 2 to the 4th, we have D to the 22nd. So 6 to the 1st is just 6. So we're just going to replace, it's just 1 6. You don't really clone it. Okay, 2 to the 4th. That would be 4 2's cloned, and I find the product, and that equals 16. So I replace the 2 to the 4th with the number 16. And again, D is a variable. Why would I clone 22 D's when I don't even know what number D represents? Okay, it's just a variable, so I just keep that D to the 22nd. Now, this time we end up with these two factors because I had two. The 6 and the 16 then need to be multiplied. This is a variable, so we're going to keep that. But we need to multiply these two non-variable factors. Okay, 6 times 16 is 96. So 96 times D to the 22nd power is the answer to that problem. See, I haven't had to multiply because I only ended up with 100. I only ended up with 64. Here there were 2. Okay, now, this time we have 2 parentheses, so we want to circle both of them as well as the outside power, 2. 20x to the 3rd power, and then everything in there then gets raised to the 2nd. And I have another parentheses here, x to the 7th power, and then there's a 2nd power outside, so we want to circle both those. So any power that's in there needs to be multiplied here by 2, and any one here by 2. So 20 would have a 1 power. Again, that's in the circle. I circled that for a reason because I know any power I put here has to be multiplied by 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, and that's the only 20 I have, so I move on to do the x. So let's do the first x. It's to the 3rd, but again, that's in that circle, so I know any power here needs to be multiplied by 2. So what's 3 times 2? 6. So you need to write 6 down. Okay, and then that was times, so plus. They're all plus on this assignment. And this x here is in a parentheses. I circled that for a reason because I know any power here, in this case it's 7, has to be times by 2, multiplied by 2. 7 times 2 is 14. And then 6 plus 14 is 20. So I have 2 factors. I have 20 to the 2nd power and x to the 20th power. Well, 20 to the 2nd I can find if I clone 2 20s and multiply them. That's equal to 400. So replace that with 400. And again, the x is a variable, okay? So don't clone x out 20 times. That'd be stupid, okay? Even if it was a number to the 20th power, I'd just use my calculator. I mean, this little key here, I wouldn't. But that's an x, so it's x to the power of 20. Okay, let's circle the parentheses first. Okay, I got one here, and I also have one here. Now that's a 2, you see. You can't read my writing very well with these powers, I realize that, okay? So any power coming out of here needs to be multiplied by 3, and any power coming out of here needs to be multiplied by 2, so remember that. I've circled pretty much everything one way or another, so we're going to have to multiply on every exponent. Okay, so big 3, big 2, and big x. So here's big 3. Well, that needs a power, so it'd be to the 1. And again, I circled that for a reason, so any power here, in this case 1, would be multiplied by that 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, that's all the big 3's you have. Now look for your big 2's right here. When I say big 2's, not the ones that are circled. Those are little 2's. Those are exponents. So here's 1. And again, that's in a parenthesis, so I need to multiply 1 times 2. 1 times 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, now x variables. First off, look at how many of them you have. You have one here and one here. So here's the first one. Now it's to the 5th power, but I put it in parentheses because there was a third outside. That 5 has to be times by 3. 5 times 3 is 15. And that's multiplication, so we're going to add. And then right here is my other x. Now it's to the power of 7, but again I circled it because anything that comes out of here needs to be multiplied by 2. So 7 times 2 would be 14. So I don't write 7, I don't write 2. I write the product of when I multiply 7 by 2, and that's 14. Okay, now 15 plus 14 is 29, so it's x to the 29th power. Okay, so 3 to the 3rd, 2 to the 2nd, and x to the 29th. Those are my 3 factors. So this I can figure out. That would be 3 3's cloned. And that would equal a product of 27. So I replace 3 to the 3rd with its equal of 27. Okay, now 2 to the 2nd would be 2 2's clone, and that gives me a product of 4. So 2 to the 2nd is replaced with 4. Okay, and then I'm not going to replicate, I'm not going to clone x 29 times. I don't even know what x is. So again, I keep it as x to the power of 29. Now, since we have these 2 number factors here, that's a variable factor, so that'll stay the same. But these 2 number factors need to be multiplied. The operation with these 2 would be to multiply. So 27 times 4 is 108. So 108 times x to the power of 29. Okay, next problem. Again, if you see parentheses, circle them, but also include that outside power, the 2nd power. Any power coming out of here needs to be multiplied by 2 before I write it down. Here's another parentheses. Any power coming out of here needs to be multiplied by 3 before I write it down here. Okay, so I have my factors. We got 10, 4, and n. Okay, so here's my 10. It has no direct power, so it's to the 1 power. And like I said, any power, before I don't write, I need to multiply it by 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. That's the only big 10 I have, so let's move on to my next factor, the 4. So the 4 again is to the 1, but I have it circled because I know any power coming out of here needs to be multiplied by 3. And 1 times 3 is 3. And that's all I have for 4s. Now n, letter n, I have 2 of those, okay? Multiplied, so that would be adding. Okay, this first n would have a power of 1, and again, it's in that parentheses with the 2nd being the outer power, so 1 times 2 is 2. You can't write 1 down when it's been circled because it's part of a parentheses. So 1 times 2 is 2. Then here's my other n. It's to the 3rd power, okay? 3 times 3 then is 9, okay? So 2 plus 9 equals 11. Okay, so I have a 10 to the 2nd factor, a 4 to the 3rd factor, and an n to the 11th factor. So 10 to the 2nd, that would be 2 10s cloned. That's 100. 4 to the 3rd, that would be 3 4s cloned. That changes into 64. N to the 11, okay, I'm not going to clone variables, okay, I'm just going to keep them the same. And then these 2 are going to need to be multiplied. So 100 times 64, 6,400 times n to the 11. Okay, now the other one's really easy, okay. I want you to look at this problem. You're not doing this on every one of them, but x to the 3rd times x to the 7th divided by x to the 4th times x to the 2nd. Well, the only base you have is x, okay, in the whole problem, because these are all powers. What's this really mean? Well, I have x to the 3rd would be a clone of 3x's times and those are times together. And then x to the 7th would just be times 7 more x's. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Divided by, just do this on this one problem, x to the 4th would be a clone of 4 x's. And times x to the 2nd would be 2 more. Now remember, in division, what I do is cancel out them factor by factor. So out, 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 out. How many x's was I left with? I was left with 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the answer to that's x to the 4th. Now surely there's got to be an easier way to do that, and there is. You have no parentheses, so I'm not going to make any circles of my own. Here's my first x. It's on top, so I write 3 down. And there's another x on top with it, multiplied by another x on top, so 7, and that would be plus 7. Now, when I get beneath the line, now I need to start writing minus. So I have 4. And then the other one's beneath the line too, so I write minus and then 2. Okay. So 3 plus 7 is 10, minus 4 is 6, minus 2 is 4, x to the 4th. And that's how you should be doing it, because that's a long process. Okay, so what I have here is x to the 3rd times another x to the 3rd divided by x to the 2nd. Okay, so just write x down. And what do you have? Well, you have a 3rd power, and then you're still on top with this other x, so we add, and then 3. Then when I move underneath the line, I want a minus 2. So what's 3 plus 3? 6. Minus 2 is 4. So it's x to the power of 4. Okay, next problem. We have 4 x's, no parentheses, so I'm not going to make any of my own circles. The circles that are there to indicate that those numbers are powers. Okay, so I have a 5, so 5th power, times, the other one's going to be plus 3. And then when I get to under the line, I need to start minusing. Minus 2, minus 4 is how that's going to work. So 5 plus 3 is 8, minus 2 is 6, minus 4 is 2. Because I would have 8 x's on top, 6 on bottom. Well, when I get done crossing them out, there's still 2 x's left on top, so x to the 2nd. Okay, x to the 5th power times x to the 3rd power divided by x to the 2nd power times x to the 1st. Again, I just write x. That's the only base in the whole problem. I mean, granted, there's 4 of them, but I can use simple math on those. So I have 5. I'm still on top of my line, so I'm still multiplying, so plus 3. Now when I move under the line, I start minusing. Minus 2, minus 1. Okay? 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 minus 2 is 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. So we have x to the 5th power. Okay, my next problem, you got x. Now we have just a 10 on top. There's no other x on top but the x to the 10th. So now when I go to the 2nd, I need to start minusing right away. So I'm minus 2, minus 5. If it is underneath the dividing line, you are subtracting it. If it's on top, you are going to add it. So 10 minus 2 is 8. 8 take away 5 is 3. So that would end up x to the 3rd. Okay, now put x down over here. Now you got some parentheses. Please circle them, the whole thing. Okay, here's the parentheses, kind of trace them. Now circle that and the outside power. Now there are 4 x's, okay, but they're in parentheses this time. So what you want to do actually with this line is just extend it so it covers the whole thing. So here's my first x on top, right here where my pen's at. Now it's to the 3rd power, but I circled it because any power here needs to be times by 4. So what is 3 times 4? You can't write 3 down, you can't write 4 down. You have to take 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, then there's another x here on top. So I will be adding, okay? Now I come to this x, okay? Go from left to right. There's an x here. 4 times 3 is 12. There's another x here. Now it's to the 4th again. But again, we need to multiply 4 times 3 because I circled it so I knew that anything that came out of there had to be multiplied by the 3rd power. So 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, now that this top x and this top x I've already figured out, but now I got x's on bottom, okay? So when I get to the bottom, I'm going to start minusing. Now this x here is to the 2 power. That is a 2. It's terrible looking. Again, that's in my circle, so any power that comes out of here has to be multiplied by 4. So what's 2 times 4? 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, and then my other x is on bottom, so I minus. If I come to an x that's on the bottom, I'm going to use the minus operator, and that's a 2, but I circled it because I knew that any power here has to be multiplied by 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. So 12 plus 12 is 24. 24 minus 6 is 16, and 16 minus 6 is 10. So it's x to the 10th power after all that mess, okay? All right, and here's another one. The only base we have to worry about is x, okay? Because the only thing I have are x's. The rest of them are exponents that I've circled. Okay, so I circle the parentheses and the outside power. Circle the parentheses and the outside power. So any power I come up with has to be multiplied by 3 here, and any power inside here has to be multiplied by 2. Okay, so here's the top x also. Extend that line so it's just one fraction. So I have my first x. 5, but you got to times by 3. 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, so that x is done. Now let's look at this x. Now I'm still on top of that line, so it's multiplying, so I add. And 3 times 2, what's 3 times 2? Well, that'd be 6. Okay, now I'm underneath the line, so now I need to start using the subtraction operator. So 3, but again, I circled it because I know any power here has to be multiplied by 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. So I subtract 9. And I come to my final x. Now we're still under the line, so minus. Because remember, and that x is to the 2. But again, I circled that for a reason, because any power that came out of here needs to be multiplied by this 2 here. Okay? And 2 times 2 is 4. So 15 plus 6 is 21. 21 minus 9 is 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. So we have x to the 8th power. Okay?